If you have ever been presented with two pieces of information that seem to contradict each other or contradict what you had thought was true, and you find yourself really confused and uncertain, you have experienced cognitive dissonance. And this sign is a great example of that, where it's like, well, what am I supposed to do now based on this information? So, as a reminder, cognitive dissonance is related to confirmation bias because when we experience confirmation bias, we often try to limit cognitive dissonance, and that's why we lean on this process a bit more. So let's go into a little bit more about what this theory says. So Festinger in 1957 is cited as the theory architect for cognitive dissonance theory. And he introduced the foundation of confirmation bias as a tool to avoid this cognitive dissonance or discomfort. So here's a lovely Dilbert cartoon that demonstrates cognitive dissonance. And I'll trust that you might pause the video so that you can read it in its entirety. But it's really about helping people who are presented with information that goes against what they thought find some sort of comfort or sense of peace in that new information they've received. So the basic tenet of cognitive dissonance theory is that when we encounter information that conflicts with our beliefs, and it could be therefore our goals and actions, a psychological discomfort emerges, and we start to find ways to limit the discomfort. So the process of reducing cognitive dissonance can happen. We can avoid information that causes discomfort, and that's part of that confirmation bias idea. And we can seek or approach information that creates psychological comfort. And again, this is that idea of confirmation bias. So in confirmation bias, we try to find this information that makes us feel good about ourselves and what we know, while avoiding information that doesn't. So here's an example using the idea of smoking. So let's say that you smoke cigarettes and you're presented with information and you know that smoking cigarettes is unhealthy. So you have this unpleasant tension state. This is your cognitive dissonance right here. You're like, well, yes and yes. And so what should I do? So one approach is that you can change your approach and say, well, smoking cigarettes is unhealthy, so I don't smoke cigarettes anymore. Or you could argue and say the research on smoking is not conclusive, so I still smoke cigarettes. So this is just showing that there's this unpleasant tension state that can occur, and what we do with that information can be either to, agree with part of it and change a behavior or attitude or belief, or argue against it and continue to hold firm. So there are two main cognitive dissonance hypotheses. And the first is that the existence of dissonance, because it's uncomfortable, will motivate a person to reduce that dissonance and achieve consonance. So this just means that achieving something that agrees with you. And this existence of dissonance is this unpleasant tension state. So when dissonance is present, in addition to trying to reduce it, we will also actively avoid situations and information that would increase the dissonance. So we would avoid people who keep bringing this up. We would not search for information that would go against it. This is where that confirmation bias comes in, because we want to feel like we're reaching consonance and not living in this state of uncomfortableness or dissonance. So just want to pause and reflect on this idea that cognitive dissonance theory says a lot about cognition, what goes on inside the mind. yet we're talking about it in a communications course, an agricultural communications course. So just reflect on, what does communication have to do with this dissonance creation, and also in reducing those senses of dissonance. So I'm not asking you to reflect on this and write it up in the blackboard, but I hope that you can start to see some of the ways that communication can step into this state, into this idea of dissonance, and help people maybe lessen feelings of dissonance and try to reach a more that consonant state. So that's my argument for including it in this class. And I had a graduate student once do a research project that looked at the role of confirmation bias and selective exposure in addressing areas of cognitive dissonance. So this is a model that she created to try to pull these concepts together in a conceptual framework. So what we have in the beginning is we have this area of inconsistency, where we have information that does not align with our existing beliefs or attitudes. And this could be that, eating GMOs is healthy. And if you don't hold that belief or attitude, then there would be an inconsistency here. So then your dissonance has increased. And then what can happen is you can change your belief, action, or perception. So I could say, well, GMOs are safe to eat. I don't have to avoid them in the store, so I'm going to change my actions. Or you can selectively search for content that will support your pre-existing belief that GMOs are risky, that there's a bit of a danger involved in eating them, that the science is out, all of those arguments. And then by doing that, my dissonance has decreased because I've reassured myself with that information through selective exposure or confirmation bias. And so I've decreased my dissonance. But again, your dissonance can also be decreased by coming more in line with the information you presented to begin with. So again, I hope that as you just reflect on your own daily exposure to information, or perhaps you're working to get someone to change a behavior, belief, action, perception, that you can see how this plays out in that when we receive information that's inconsistent with what we think or know, or think we know about something, we can increase the state of dissonance. I mean, honestly, being in a graduate level course, you spend a lot of your time right here, starting, trying to process the information that you have and, hopefully lock it away for recall later. But when we're presented with something that really challenges our existing beliefs or attitudes, we are going to do something to try to decrease that dissonance. So whether that's changing or searching for information to confirm what we already thought. So this is setting up this idea of these three mental mechanisms that happens according to the theory of cognitive dissonance. I introduced selective exposure in the previous figure, but this is our tendency to avoid information that would create cognitive dissonance because it's incompatible with what we already thought, knew, believed about the topic. So we're just going to selectively expose. This is a real concern, again, with the variety of media outlets that exist and the potential for bias, and also in the way social media uses algorithms to send information to you that continues to be that information that you've already interacted with. We also have post-decision dissonance. This is buyer's remorse. So this is strong doubts experienced after making an important close call decision that's difficult to reverse. So if you've ever bought a car and then went and researched the car after just to confirm that you made the right choice, or if you decided to go back to school and you made it into the university, You might go back and research it a bit more. So this is about trying to alleviate any of that anxiety that may arise after making that important decision. Then we have minimal justification. And this is a claim that the best way to stimulate an attitude change in others is to offer just enough incentive to elicit counter-attitudinal behavior. So this is the idea of nudging someone. So you're not going to ask them to run a marathon tomorrow to get into better shape. You might ask them to, take their dog for a 1 mile walk tonight, or to, don't eat anything after 8 o'clock at night. These are small, simple nudges. And what, again, this theory is saying is that if you want someone to change their attitude or belief, you can't expect them to make a rapid change right away. It has to be a small change to stimulate that growth or that development. So this theory, I hope you can see, has applications in a wide variety of areas, including political science, science communication, including agriculture, health communication, and then how we leverage social media. So your first discussion topic is to check out this article called Seeking Confirmation, Biased Information Search and Deliberation in the Food Domain. It's the article I asked you to read for this, and it has both confirmation bias and cognitive dissonance. So you're just going to read one article to get both of these. And it tested the presence of confirmation bias regarding pro-health or pro-taste information regarding food. So really focus in on the study's findings as inspiration. And think about how you could create a marketing campaign that would use cognitive dissonance theory to be more effective. So really, what could you do to either reinforce or help alleviate, and this is straight from the article, confirmation bias with respect to dietary choices? And you can choose any type of food domain item, gluten-free, low sodium, keto diet, whatever you want to do. So you're welcome also to select a specific product to use as an example in your response. So if you wanted to use almond milk to talk about how to either reinforce or help alleviate confirmation bias. So this, again, check out the study's findings. They do a nice job of talking a bit about okay, what does all this mean if we were to try to implement this into a food marketing area. And I think that will be a really nice exercise for your discussion post this week. So here's my review slide. Confirmation bias and dissonance are different ideas, different concepts, but they do go hand in hand. Confirmation bias is something that is this constant process to try to limit cognitive dissonance. And we have some early scholars who have been recognized as developing these theories, but others have certainly contributed since then. We, as communicators, can help reduce cognitive dissonance because we can help provide information in a way using those 3 mental mechanisms that people might be more willing to approach or seek that information and find psychological comfort. So the final point here is that these theories have been used in a variety of contexts to better understand the cognitive process that is often underscoring our communication efforts and the effectiveness of those.